Springfield's Talk 1041, and a good Thursday. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the show. Tomorrow, Friday, Heroes Breakfast. If you're a veteran, then you get a free breakfast at Scramblers as we do broadcast live there for that show. And that is thanks, of course, to Scramblers, Delta Roofing Air Services, Heating, Cooling, Plumbing, Electrical, and the Warrior's Journey all coming together to buy breakfast for veterans. So it's a great morning to come out and to join us. One of the big news items occurring yesterday. It's a I don't know, it's a mixture of, on one hand, it is a sign of the massive problem that we have in this country, but on the other hand, it's ultimately, most likely, something that's going to be overturned, and that is this three-judge court that decided that the authority Congress gave to the president regarding tariffs, that they just don't like that authority, and deciding that regardless of Congress authorizing the tariffs ability, and in fact, they've done that 5 different occasions in different capacities over the years. This wasn't a Trump thing. This is done administrations ago, and of course, tariffs have been used by presidents over and over and over again, the previous administration being one of them, implementing tariffs specifically on China. And when Biden did that, he was praised for it, how great it was going to save jobs. It's just a wonderful thing that he did. But of course, Trump is evil and Hitler, and so when he does it, it's not good. And that's essentially what this 3-court panel of judges just up and decided, overriding the authority of Congress. And last night, when this news broke, Laura Ingraham had Senator Kennedy from Louisiana on and revealed it to him, and his response was, "Oh, you're telling me that some judge just decided to overrule the executive authority and the congressional authority? Well, it's been a day since that happened with these left-wing judges. It'll be overturned." And many have been arguing for some time that the Supreme Court is almost getting to the point of negligence in not addressing, particularly when it comes to these injunctions from individual judges across the country that are putting injunctions nationwide, well beyond the area that they represent. This 3-judge panel is a different jurisdictional situation, but the principle is pretty much the same, what we've seen play out here, and that is the Democrats have done everything that they have been able to do or tried to do to prevent political opposition from being in any position of power, everything from, of course, trying to imprison Trump, trying to, and in fact, successfully, through rhetoric, encouraging people to attempt to assassinate Trump, and nothing has worked. And, of course, there was the attempt during the first administration using a FISA court to try and overthrow the Trump presidency. And it's gotten to the point now where what we've seen is these left-wing judges that are just saying, well, we'll just essentially negate the will of the people in the election of the presidency by just blocking stuff we don't like. Even to where you have, some judge that is a circuit judge somewhere just for the entire country saying, I don't like that, so the president can't do it any longer. And it's believed by most legal scholars across the political spectrum that once the Supreme Court does eventually address this stuff, that they will put a stop to it, because the insanity of this, some of the judges in particular that have been putting these nationwide injunctions on what Trump is doing, there's, I think, 680 some of those judges. You think about the insanity of that. I mean, even if 1/10 of them were left-wing, which it's much more than that, that means that you have randomly across this country, 60 to 70 judges that in any given moment can halt the executive branch just because they don't like what he's doing. And you've got, no country can be run by that form of insanity. And increasingly, the Supreme Court, again, is coming under scrutiny because they are not fast-tracking this thing, and it's leading to an increasing number of Americans seeing the courts not as the steady hand that is supposed to settle disputes, but instead a branch of the government that is being used by one political party in order to, in this particular case, just usurp the executive branch, the congressional branch in some instances, and basically just doing whatever the heck they want to do. And again, now, this particular tariff situation is a little bit different than some of the injunctions that have been occurring. But you just even the implications of this. And the judges saying that, oh, any of these deals that have been worked out because of the tariffs, that has to be undone. I mean, all of the benefits that already this country has seen in terms of a number of different countries agreeing to come to the table, writing up agreements, still for many of them agreements in principle that are all for the purpose of making it better for the United States. And to have 3 judges just come in and be like, no, we don't think so, undo all that. Because we just interpret the authority that Congress gave the president. We're interpreting that we don't like the way that he did it. Now, some people may argue, and some people have, that the authority Congress has given to a president, to the presidency, the executive branch, in order to come up with different tariff situations or, to wheel and deal, if you will, or to utilize tariffs in different capacities, that is something that isn't constitutional. Well, the problem for the people making that argument is that has never been taken through the courts. That has never been challenged. And largely because it would be, I suppose, Congress or interested parties in Congress that would have standing in order to do that potentially, but they are the ones who gave that authority to the presidency, whether we like it or not. And so here we are. But the fact of the matter is, these judgments, these opinions, these instances in which judges, for example, the most recent with the tariffs, stepping in and deciding that they're going to play dictator for a day, hasn't happened under previous presidents. And previous presidents have utilized the authority given to them through legislation by Congress in order to alter the tariff landscapes for different purposes, which, of course, indicates that this has nothing to do with the law. It has nothing to do even with tariffs. It's all about Trump. And the clear latest attempt by the Democrats, who have tried everything under the sun to stop the American people from choosing whom it is they want to be president and from choosing the direction that we head in this country, have decided at this point to utilize their positions when they have them from the bench to just try and negate the election by preventing the person elected by the American people from doing the job that the American people elected him to do. Pyramid Roofing Company, talk and text line 447-KSGF. Have some audio in the program this morning. Kash Patel, director of the FBI, among other things, talking about what it is or when it is, what people should expect in terms of revelations January 6th, and the FBI's involvement in January 6th, saying that people are going to be, I think he used the word shocked, but he sat down with Brett Baer. We'll play some of that audio. Also, Trump announcing that he is considering pardoning 2 of the individuals that would eventually be convicted of being part of a kidnapping plot of Gretchen Whitmer. noting that it seems as if they were railroaded. And it was more than railroaded. This will, if he does do this, and by the way, he should do it, is going to be presented as Donald Trump is encouraging kidnapping of governors. Donald Trump is encouraging terrorism. Donald Trump is encouraging, these radical nutcases to, threaten violence and kidnapping against Democrats and so forth. I want to just revisit some of the basics of that case because there has never been exposed in this country such a clear-cut case of our government deliberately encouraging, enticing people who otherwise have no interest whatsoever and may not have even known who Gretchen Whitmer was, and the government creating a scenario so that they could then arrest people that they coaxed into being part of this thing and make a big to-do about it. And that is exactly what happened with the Gretchen Whitmer case. So we'll have some of that coming up as well this morning. Right now, the latest news update.
And the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see showers and thunderstorms throughout the day with a high near 70. Tonight mostly cloudy with a low around 54. For your Friday, mostly sunny skies with a high near 74. And looking ahead to Saturday, sunny with a high near 80.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced yesterday Israel had killed senior Hamas leader Mohammed Sinwar. So there's a new martyr for the left to mourn. Netanyahu making the announcement in a speech to the National Legislature of Israel. He had previously only said the terrorist leader had apparently been killed. Sinwar is one of Israel's most wanted targets. He was the force of an Israeli strike on a hospital in southern Gaza earlier this month. Netanyahu said on May 21st that it was likely he had been killed. There was no confirmation from Hamas, so apparently that official statement has come down. And again, another martyr for the left, the Democrats. So we can perhaps watch them wring their hands over the death of this terrorist. Around the same time, Trump announced that he talked with Netanyahu and convinced him to not launch a military strike against Iran amid concerns over the regime's nuclear program. During a press conference, a reporter asked, "Did you warn Prime Minister Netanyahu against taking some action that could disrupt the talks there?" in a phone call last week, to which Trump replied, "Well, I'd like to be honest, yes, I did." The reporter asked what Trump said to Netanyahu during the phone call. "I just said I don't think it's appropriate. We're having very good discussions with him." Trump suggested that it would be better to settle it with a very strong document with inspections and no trust, saying, "I want it very strong where we can go in with inspections. We can take whatever we want. We can blow up whatever we want, but nobody gets killed. We can blow up a lab, but nobody's going to be in the lab, as opposed to everybody being in the lab and blowing it up. Two ways of doing it." I told them this would be inappropriate to do it right now because we're very close to a solution. Now, that could change at any moment. It could change with a phone call, but right now, I think they want to make a deal. Now, I believe part of the reason that Trump is being open about this is to send a message to Iran that, let's not forget, you don't just have to worry about the United States. We're holding the dog on the leash here. That, here is the snarling Rottweiler that is ready to attack, and I've got the leash in one hand while my other hand is open in order to work out some sort of deal to make sure that you do not have the eventual acquisition of nuclear weapons. And so the usage of that knowledge, which, Iran isn't naive to this. Iran isn't in some sort of delusional belief that it is, not a possibility that Iran could carry out a strike, of which, they've done in the past, particularly when it comes to Iran's nuclear capabilities. But this is putting on public notice, letting Iran know, again, here is the deal I have in this hand. In the other hand, I'm holding the chain, at which at the end is Israel just ready. And in fact, they were going to do it, but I held them back. And so it is, without saying as much, essentially letting Iran know, here's door number one. And by the way, here's door number two. And Israel's function to open it as quickly as possible. And I'm the one who has the ability to unlock it. There was an interview done. You want to take a break and then play some audio. One of the hostages that was recently freed sat down yesterday with CNN. And the interview went in a direction I imagine CNN probably did not anticipate and did not expect. But, they're talking with the guy. What was it like? What sort of conversations were going on? And one of the revelations from this hostage was that there were a lot of conversations, of course, about politics and things going on in the United States, and how Hamas was really, really hoping Kamala Harris would get elected president of the United States. And he explains sort of how that all played out and how it was they were treated as hostages once it was clear Donald Trump was going to be the next president. So I'll have that coming up. I'm Nick Reed. Okay, let's see. Looking at the clock here. I'm going to play this audio coming up in just a moment. First, I do want to remind you about some of the incredible deals that you can take advantage of. Our good friends at Pennegar Honda, South Campbell, just south of Walnut Lawn. Pre-owned Hondas. Now, that's generally when you look at pre-owned, you're like, do I want to go to my bank or credit union or see what sort of financing they offer? Because it's generally, they're not the most favorable interest rates, 0.99% financing on select certified pre-owned Hondas. And, of course, pre-owned Hondas are pretty coveted because of the dependability of Honda vehicles. Now, if you're looking for something new, like the 2025 Honda Accord Hybrid, 2.49% financing, 51 miles per gallon, and 2.99% financing on new Honda CRV Hybrid. And they have a deal going on right now. Every new car purchase, free gas all summer. So throw that in as an added bonus. And don't forget tomorrow's Friday, Food Truck Friday, as it is always Food Truck Friday at Pennegar Honda. Great time to go by, check out a new vehicle, do a test drive perhaps, browse around the lot. Tomorrow, you can do so while eating Pizza Deco Pizza. That will be the food truck at Pennegar Honda tomorrow, South Campbell, just south of Walnut Lawn. Going to get a traffic update and then going to play audio. A hostage freed from Hamas reveals that his terrorist captors wanted Kamala Harris to be elected president of the United States. So I don't think this is probably any huge shock to objective people that she is the one they preferred to have in the White House as they continue to carry out or attempt to carry out their terror campaign. And also the very, very stark difference in treatment they began receiving once the terrorists realized they were going to be dealing with Donald Trump as opposed to Kamala Harris in the White House.
Springfield's Talk 1041, the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by Wolfpack Cleaners, your residential and commercial cleaning professionals. Today we'll see showers and thunderstorms throughout the day with a high near 70. Tonight mostly cloudy with a low around 54. For your Friday, mostly sunny skies with a high near 74. And looking ahead to Saturday, sunny with a high near 80.
Haley Gomez, general assignment reporter of Daily Caller, had a piece that was surrounding an interview CNN did yesterday, or they aired it yesterday anyhow, with freed Israeli hostage Omer Shem Tov. And a lot of the discussion, anytime these interviews occur, there is this attempt to paint a picture for the viewer, for the listener, oftentimes anyhow. What was it like? How did they treat you? What did they talk about? And there's actually a component to this that I think we oftentimes don't think about. We imagine, when we let ourselves, we imagine the horrific things that, and this is what we hear about when hostages get released, right? But there is a lot of time surrounding that, and this just seems so incomprehensible, I think, to any of us who haven't lived through it, but in which, despite the fact that these are horrific monsters, they are demons that do some of the most horrific things, they aren't doing that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so there's oftentimes casual conversations, and you've seen this portrayed in some capacity, probably in movies, oftentimes movies based off of true stories in which the captors, over time, or the terrorist, they start just having what one would think are almost surreal, normal conversations with the people whose lives they're threatening, and vice versa. And so this is an area in which this hostage is talking to CNN about some of the discussions they had, things they were talking about. And it came up that, according to the hostage, that when it came to Donald Trump, they were very afraid of him.
They were very scared of him. Yeah, they wanted the terrorist.
We're afraid of Trump.
Yeah, they wanted Kamala to be chosen, to be elected.
You talk politics with them?
Yeah. They wanted Kamala to be elected. When Trump became president, the way they treated us changed. For me, personally, this is what I
think
felt.
Because they anticipated that a deal would come soon.
Yeah.
And that's when they started giving you more food.
Exactly. More food, treated me better, stopped cursing me, stopped spitting on me.
Now, I do wonder, those that genuinely felt that Kamala Harris would be a more stable hand in the world, and this was one of the campaign arguments made by the Democrats and the media, that when it comes to world peace, Kamala Harris was clearly the choice. Donald Trump was some ham-fisted Wreck-It Ralph that was going to cause World War III. And I remember Kamala Harris out there, and even Biden talking about how secretly that these world leaders would pull them aside and say, oh, we really hope you've got to win for the sake of the world. When you hear that, now that's rhetoric, that's campaign talk. This is real stuff here. And I oftentimes try to get in the minds of people who think differently than I, and I'm wondering, when you hear that, what do you think? Do you just ignore it? I mean, that's reality. Now, you may not like that. You may think, well, the terrorists were wrong, but that's reality. And the fact that immediately, now, of course, it's the left, so they may just, this hostage victim is just lying. This Israeli hostage victim is lying to help Donald Trump. Of course, no reasonable, sane person is going to think that. But when you hear that immediately, when the terrorists realized that Trump got elected president, their entire way of treating some of these people, or at least this particular hostage, changed. They recognized that things were much different now. Much of which was a recognition that they weren't in control, at least to the degree that they had been, in which virtually every talking point they put out, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris would go out and be their spokesperson. Now, that's a reality a lot of people on the left, of course, would not want to acknowledge, but it's factually true. Any one of the accusations that was made by Joe Biden or Kamala Harris that was a criticism of the way Netanyahu was doing things was first said by Hamas. Any of the characterizations that it was the Israelis who weren't, quote, doing enough to prevent civilian deaths, that came after those declarations made by Hamas. Anytime anyone from the administration would talk about 10,000 innocent civilians killed or 35,000 babies killed, those numbers were always numbers that were released by Hamas. One can characterize the relationship between the Biden administration and Hamas any way they want, but fact of the matter is they were using the exact same talking points that originated with Hamas. Hamas had, effectively, no greater spokesperson on this planet than the people from the Biden administration. I mean, who else and I know you're like, well, Biden didn't have credibility, but just by virtue of being the president of the United States, who gave greater credibility to the terrorists than Biden? I mean, just think about it. Was there anyone out there whose accusations against Netanyahu, whose accusations against the Israeli military, the IDF, whose claims of all of these, the numbers of civilians, or the Israelis shot a missile into a hospital, all of these things that originated as propaganda from Hamas? What voice out there did more to effectively spread that propaganda than the White House under the Biden administration? I suspect even those who don't want to acknowledge the reality probably can't think of any person that was a greater voice and more effective voice for spreading the Hamas message. Probably can't even think of one. And the reason that you can't think of one is because the truth is it was Biden or his surrogates, Kamala Harris being one of them. Is it any wonder that Hamas wanted Kamala Harris to be elected president of the United States? I mean, it's really a no-brainer. It's by the way, you're not going to hear a heck of a lot of this talked about today in mainstream media anyhow. Now, you may hear it on programs like this. And if it is brought up on any of the mainstream media networks, I can guarantee you this is exactly. There's a couple of approaches. You think, all right, how does the left turn this against Trump? Well, one, they'll accuse the hostage of being a liar. Well, he feels like maybe because Trump's president, it's in his best interest to just, whomever president is right now. If Kamala had been elected, then he probably would say, oh, yes, they wanted Trump to be president. He's just trying to win favor as a thank you to the United States. They may speculate that that this was some sort of mind game, that the terrorists were playing with the hostages, and that, of course, they wouldn't talk politics with these hostages. I mean, come on, that's not realistic. And even if they did, they certainly wouldn't tell them what they really believed. Or the third approach that the left would take with this sort of information is that the reason they started being nice to the hostages or to this particular hostages because they knew that they would get some sort of sweetheart deal with Trump, and so they didn't have to be as mean because they saw how Trump talked about dictators and the nice things that he would say about Putin and how he embraced Kim Jong-un during his previous administration, and so they were like, hey, this guy doesn't seem so bad. Maybe we don't have to be so mean to these hostages. Now, I know that is nonsensical rationalization, but we're talking about the left here. Now, I suspect we aren't going to be treated to any of those offerings simply because they're not. This isn't something that CNN's going to be talking about. The other network's going to be talking about, beyond, of course, the airing of the interview itself on CNN. I think we can all. Can you imagine the coverage it would get if this were the other way around and this hostage was like, yeah, they really wanted Trump to get elected president. They were afraid of Kamala. It'd probably be one of the first 3 news stories in every newscast that aired for 24 hours at least. By the way, this is going to give me an opportunity to revisit, and for some of you here for the very first time, the fact that before anyone else ever even thought legitimately that Joe Biden could be president of the United States, bin Laden, yes, that bin Laden, had a plan to make Biden president because he believed that what they failed to do on 9/11, Biden would be able to do as president, and that is destroy the country. So we'll revisit that coming up after a quick break. I'm Nick Reed. This CNN interview with a freed hostage, noting that the terrorists were really hoping Kamala Harris would be elected president, and how immediately the mood changed, including the way they were treated when Donald Trump was elected. As Kamala weighs running for president out in California, that may make a good endorsement for her. We've seen the extremists within the left wing of the Democrat Party and what a headache it has been for the Democrats, particularly when it comes to, these hillbilly states us anti-science heathens that are bitterly clinging to God and to the Bible and to our guns and all that stuff. See, we don't understand the sophistication of terrorism. And so, they just had a real difficult time, the Kamala Harris campaign, balancing how to deal with their left-wing activists within the party while at the same time not appearing to be a bit off-putting by normal Americans. But out in California, I mean, having Hamas endorsements, that might, at least in the primary for, in terms of vying against other Democrats in California, that might actually be a big winner for her. There was an article about how one of the legitimately groundswells of support for Kamala Harris is the GOP, because they think we can finally maybe get the governor office back as Republicans if she is the option for the Democrats. And so that they are actively working on ways to make sure she is the candidate for Democrats out in California. Now back to this recognition that terrorists were supporters of Kamala Harris and wanted her to be elected president. This isn't the first time that we've seen terrorists support and back a Democrat. In fact, well before Joe Biden was ever reasonably thought to be somebody that would be president of the United States, bin Laden had a plan in place to make him president, believing that he would destroy the country. I grabbed a story from ABC News, May 3rd, 2012. This is back when Obama was president. Headline, again, ABC News. Headline, Bin Laden letter, kill Obama, leave, quote, totally unprepared Biden alone. The story read, Osama bin Laden aimed to assassinate President Barack Obama but directed fellow al-Qaeda fighters to leave Vice President Joe Biden alone, describing him as totally unprepared to take over and predicting a crisis in America if Biden were president. This, according to a newly declassified letter from the terrorist mastermind. Now, again, this story is 13 years old, from 2012. In the missive, part of a trove of documents seized by Navy SEALs in the raid that killed bin Laden 1 year ago, bin Laden asked for an update on a plan to kill Obama or General David Petraeus, either in Pakistan or at Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan. Obama made a televised speech from Bagram during his surprise visit to the war-torn country this week. Bin Laden detailed how he ordered one loyal follower to, quote, prepare two groups. One in Pakistan, and the other in the Bagram area of Afghanistan, with the mission of anticipating and spotting the visits of Obama or Petraeus to Afghanistan or Pakistan to target the aircraft of either one of them. Quote, again, this is directly from bin Laden in his letter to his al-Qaeda operatives. Quote, they are not to target visits by U.S. Vice President Biden, Secretary of Defense Gates, Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman Mullen, or the Special Envoy to Pakistan and Afghanistan, Holbrooke. The groups will remain on the lookout for Obama or Petraeus. The reason for concentrating on them, bin Laden wrote, is that Obama is the head of infidelity, and killing him automatically will make Biden take over the presidency for the remainder of the term, as it is the norm over there. Biden is totally unprepared for that post, which will lead the U.S. into a crisis. Well, but again, this is 2012. And this was a period of time, incidentally, we're not talking like right after 9/11. Where things are chaotic, and so like, well, it would be difficult for any vice president to grab the wheel. This is 2012. Remember during the Obama era how wonderful everything was, how peaceful everything was, and we weren't dealing with any sort of major crisis like a post-9/11 era. Bin Laden just recognized that Biden, despite the fact that he had been a politician his entire life, adult life, despite the fact that this was somebody that, according to Obama, was chosen because of his brilliant foreign policy experience. Bin Laden had the clarity to recognize, oh, no, this guy will lead the country into crisis. This guy is a train wreck. This guy, it's been a joke that one of the reasons, or it was a joke for a period of time, that the reason Obama really picked Biden was an insurance policy, that no one would ever want to assassinate Obama because that would send the country into this downward spiral because Biden would become vice president. And the joke always, it carried on as well when it came to Kamala Harris. But no one thought, I guess realistically, that our enemies might see that as something positive. And bin Laden did. When you step back and you look at it, it is really amazing how self-destructive we can be as Americans. You had the mastermind of 9/11, who over a decade after that operation was carried out, and spending years in hiding, still communicating, attempting to finish what they started, believing that that attack on September 11th would destroy the country, miscalculating that. Then the eventual plan by bin Laden was to have Obama assassinated so that Biden would become president, believing that successfully would do what they failed to do and bring down the country. That Joe Biden as president of the United States would be more destructive than the terrorists were on 9/11. Now, you might disagree with that assessment, but that was bin Laden's assessment. If he had the ability, can you imagine, like, if either he wasn't killed and were still alive, or just somehow were to learn in the future that he would not have to do that because we would, quote, choose to do that to ourselves. Now, of course, you and I both know the reality of that election and the funny numbers and so forth, but outside of that, just the fact that Democrats would pick that guy. So it's not inconsistent. You look at that administration, so you had Biden president of the United States, someone that bin Laden wanted to be president of the United States, and now the revelation from one of the hostages being held by Hamas all of this time saying, oh yeah, Hamas, the terrorists, they were really hoping that Kamala Harris would be president of the United States. Is that not a red flag? Seems to me like one. Meanwhile, if you get some absolute nobody that is declared, like a Proud Boy member that is supportive of Donald Trump, that requires a lot of real soul searching. But actual terrorists that actively participate in a way that tries to make Democrats president of the United States, that somehow we're not supposed to be that interested in. Seems pretty significant to me. Ozarks Elder Law. So many of you know Lori Rook, and maybe your first introduction to Lori Rook was time that she spent on the show as she was running for state treasurer in Missouri, recognizing what she felt was, I don't know if injustice is the word that she would necessarily use, but things were wrong and they needed to be righted. And that is what has led her through her career. She and the ladies in white of Ozarks Elder Law. When it comes to these a will or any sort of medical care, your power of attorney stuff, you've got to make sure that you plan, and they make it simple. 10 area locations across the Ozarks, free consultation, and an official plan gets made for you, and then there's no hourly fees. They tell you up front this is what it'll cost to execute it. That is the sort of service that you get. Incredible group of people, incredible gal, Ozarks Elder Law at ozarkselderlaw.com. Springfield's Talk 104.1. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. My name is Nick Reed. If you haven't downloaded the app, it's a very convenient place for you to also listen to the show if you happen to get out of radio signal range. Maybe that is just because of proximity to the tower, or you get into a metal building and sometimes, FM signals don't necessarily make it through those metal buildings as easily as others do. And so anyhow, it's just it's another option for you to be able to listen to the program. Maybe you're traveling. In fact, I had a text this morning from one of you that is listening on their way up through Wisconsin. And so safe travels there. And I know we've got listeners actually kind of all over the place, oftentimes people that move or on vacation even. And that app usage is very convenient. And the podcasts are there as well. You can easily text the studio with the talk and text line button that is within the app. A lot of great uses for it. Someone had sent in the following on the Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line saying, "Hi, Nick, I'm a Republican. I vote Republican, and I just want to know if you can, or if we can ever have a discussion about the Republicans in the Missouri Senate repealing the Paid Sick Leave Act and doing exactly what the Democrats do, and why all but one Missouri senator voted to repeal the earned paid sick leave that the voters voted for. These are the reasons that people vote Democrat, and I would like to have an honest discussion about it. I would like for it to be broadcast on air so people know about what we have talked about this on numerous occasions. Now, not to nitpick, but I feel like there's a bit of a contradiction here. On one hand, noting that Republicans in overturning this are doing exactly what Democrats always do, but then saying this is why people vote Democrat seems like a bit of a contradiction. I would also argue that I don't think that the current state of power in Missouri reflects that people vote for Democrats over Republicans, or they switch because of this sort of thing, given that these sorts of political moves have been done in the past for different reasons, and Democrats can't even get beyond being, Republicans have a supermajority. Democrats in Missouri have been grappling for a long time with the fact that they are essentially irrelevant, and this has been the case for a significant amount of time. So in terms of the implication of, the Republicans overturning the Paid Sick Leave Act and it resulting in people deciding to, or that sort of thing, people switching from Republican to Democrat, I just don't think that elections bear out that. Now, when it comes to the issue itself, I can tell you why Republicans did this, because it's a devastating blow to small business owners. Not just, and we're not simply talking about, well, it's going to be a little harder. We're talking about some of them just going to have to shut down because they will not be able to afford what it is that they will have to do in order to comply with the government forcing them to implement these new paid sick leave rules. And also, this wasn't just there were a lot of Democrats. This is how bad many business owners in Missouri are recognizing this to be, is that even Democrats were part of trying to formulate the legislation that would overturn that. Now, they complained that what they were wanting to be done wasn't being listened to by Republicans. So, and then in the end, of course, this gives them the ability to, also vote against it, even though they were attempting to be part of it, and then to paint Republicans as voting against the will of the people and so forth. But the reality is they were just as eager because of small business owners in their district. It went beyond. This is how impacting in a negative way That aspect of it was supposed to be. In fact, it overshadowed the concerns about the increased minimum wage. Usually what happens, and you see it all over the country, whenever the government forces an increase in pay, be it through vote of the people or legislature, small businesses are the one, big, huge corporations, it doesn't have an impact on them in terms of overall employment and bottom line and so forth. They can absorb it. But the smaller businesses get, the more devastating it becomes. And so when you have the little, tree of businesses, and at the bottom of the tree, the smallest businesses, those are the ones that end up closing up shop. And we know this because it happens in every part of the country in which you have the raising of the minimum wage. And the impact of the paid sick leave portion of this was viewed as being so negatively impacting by business owners in Missouri that they just kind of almost forgot about the minimum wage part of it and the impact of that. And the fact that you had Democrats on board trying to be part of crafting the legislation to overturn this tells you how much feedback they were getting from small business owners in their district. Now, some people may not like that answer. Some people may say that is irrelevant if that's what the people want. It doesn't matter, even if there are unforeseen circumstances that are going to turn out awful and horrible, that lawmakers should not utilize their ability. I mean, they're not circumventing anything. Missouri is set up this way, to which they have the ability to go about this in the way that they have been. And there may be some people who disagree with it, but those are the reasons why Republicans did do that. It's in an effort to save so many of these small businesses. And again, the fact that so many Democrats were attempting to be part of helping in that effort, I think is a demonstration that the fear of the negative impact is large enough that it really did cross party lines. I want to play some audio from Kash Patel coming up, sitting down with Brett Baer, talking about everything from the damage that James Comey has done with his little prank or threat or whatever you want to call it regarding the assassination attempt messaging that he posted on social media, to what it is people can expect and when they can expect to get information on the FBI's involvement on January 6th. We've got that coming up. Weather as well. Oh, Christy Fulnecki, obviously she's not here today. She's, got some court case, and so she's going to be doing her job that pays her, which I guess makes sense. Traffic update in a moment. Right now, the latest news.
And the First Alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see showers and thunderstorms throughout the day with a high near 70. Tonight, mostly cloudy with a low around 54. For your Friday, mostly sunny with a high near 74. And looking ahead to Saturday, sunny skies with a high near 80.
All right. Kash Patel, director of the FBI, sat down with Brett Baer and talked about a number of different things. Now, the first thing that I want to play here is regarding James Comey. And something that I think a lot of people didn't think about. And that is the fact that when you have former director of the FBI, somebody that the media praises and holds up as infallible, post something that is interpreted, understandably so, by many Americans as a call to assassinate Trump, then plays dumb little idiot over, like, oh, I had no idea that's what it meant, and acts like it's no big deal, that sends a message that putting out on social media messages regarding the assassination of the president's no big deal. And that actually causes quite a bit of problems. Brett Baer opens up talking about the fact that Comey has been critical of Patel.
The FBI is bigger than any leader it's ever had or ever will have. And James Comey is a private citizen, and he can walk around the beach and talk about seashells and Crayola crayons for all I care about, and talk about how we're the conspiracy theorists. But I just remind the American people of one thing. When that man was the leader of the FBI, he perpetrated the largest criminal conspiracy, packaged political information from overseas, took it to a federal FISA court, and illegally surveilled a political opponent. So I won't be lectured on how to run this FBI from that man.
Well, James Comey was just on talking about all of that, the seashells and everything, and he also talked about you.
Obviously, you start with the fact that the guy has literally nothing in his entire adult life that prepares him for this role, and so that's deeply concerning to start with. In a way, I kind of a little bit sorry for the guy. He's barked at the FBI nonsense for years, and now he not only caught the car, he's got to drive the car, and so that is a daunting task for him. I hope he lets the career people do their jobs, but they've already forced out a bunch of good career people and sent a chill through the organization.
That's James Comey.
If he wants to come after me, no problem. I've been living rent-free in that guy's head for years, and that's just a bonus. Do you know how many copycats we've had to investigate as a result of that beachside venture from the former director?
Is that right?
Do you know how many agents I've had to take offline from chasing down child sex predators, fentanyl traffickers, terrorists? Because everywhere across this country, people are popping up on social media and think that a threat to the life of the President of the United States is a joke and they can do it because he did it. That's what I'm having to deal with every single day. And that's what I'm having to pull my agents and analysts off because he thought it was funny to go out there and make a political statement.
Well, I think most reasonable people at this point realize that James Comey is just a bad person. This is beyond incompetent. It's beyond political. He's just a bad human being. And what many people also recognized is that he has been part of this culture from the left of normalizing violence and calls of violence against those with whom he disagrees, specifically, of course, Donald Trump. And they've been successful. I mean, one of the recipients of their messaging hit Trump with a bullet, and the other one came darn close. So they've been successful other than actually killing Trump. But what Patel there also notes is that on the other end of it, aside from the normalization of violence, what happens when the left then tries to play it off like, oh, now this is no big deal. I mean, come on. Well, that sends another dangerous message. You see, the FBI and the Secret Service, they don't, and at times if local law enforcement gets involved, they don't have the luxury of dismissing open calls to threaten the life of the President of the United States, as just dismissing it as a joke or as no big deal or as, oh, they probably just found those shells on the beach. They don't have that luxury. They don't get to just ignore those things. And so the Democrats have created for them a win-win situation, but for Americans it's a lose-lose situation On one hand, you have one of two results. You have either people that get inspired by it because here's the credibility of a former FBI director that is posting messages about assassinating the president, or on the other hand, you have people that are receiving the message that it's not that big of a deal to do that. Oh, what are you getting so bothered about? And in those instances, that encourages people who otherwise might not do it to think, well, it's not that big of a deal. The former FBI director can do it. And look, he's sitting here being interviewed on these talk shows about how nutty the Trump administration is for taking this seriously. So you can post things that suggest Trump should be assassinated and it's no big deal. Well, the FBI doesn't get to just dismiss those cases. And so, to Kash Patel's point here, we have to, because James Comey thought it was, quote, funny or cute or clever, resources, agents that are tracking down sex child predators, human traffickers, drug smugglers, have to now devote time to investigating any and every one of these postings that were inspired by the funny post of Comey in order to make sure that they're not true and legitimate. By the way, the FBI just, I don't think I printed the story off, arrested somebody for making threats against the president. Oh, yeah, an illegal immigrant, somebody in this country illegally. So, of course, someone else that the Democrats will hold vigil for. Not only is he in this country illegally, but also wants the president dead. So I'm sure they'll figure out a way to run this guy for Congress. It'd be bonus if they find out he beats his wife. Be a keynote speaker for Democrat events across the nation. Now, after the break, I want to play audio of Kash Patel talking about FBI sources around the Capitol on January 6th, saying that when the information comes out, it will, quote, surprise and shock people. Kash Patel sitting down with Brett Baer, interview, and January 6th, the FBI's involvement to what capacity? Now, we know the FBI was involved. This is not disputed. In fact, some of the trials that were held against those that were more violent on January 6th in the Capitol, the evidence against them were the FBI sources that had infiltrated on January 6th, pretending to be Trump supporters. So the question is, how far, how deep did it go? Was this a scenario in which FBI assets were mere observers? And if that was the case, given that we were told this was worse than 9/11, why did they not intervene? I mean, can you imagine if it turned out that on 9/11, there were FBI agents that were part of that in some capacity, but we never learned why. We never learned how many of those individuals were assets of the FBI, and they didn't step in and stop it. Because according to Democrats, January 6th was worse than 9/11. So why did the FBI let it happen? Why did these assets not step in? Or did it go even further than that? Did they openly encourage it? Did they incite it? This is what a lot of people are wanting to know. And people, particularly after in retrospect, the tease of Epstein and the big nothing that turned into, well, there's still more to come that we've got to sift through and so forth. People, I think, rightfully so, who want truth and justice, who want people who are corrupt to be held accountable, are becoming a little tired of waiting, though that sometimes these things do take time. Kash Patel on that issue of when people will begin to learn this information.
You know, you were on with Maria a few weeks ago, and you said this.
What we can do now is continue to put out the documents and the information that these people withheld from the American public. You're about to see a wave of transparency.
What do you mean?
Just give us about a week or two.
All right, we're almost at 2 weeks. So this is about Crossfire Hurricane. You just talked about that, all that you've been learning. Can you give us a little of that wave of transparency?
Absolutely. So just quickly on Crossfire Hurricane, that is a continuing production. We have found material, and I'm the Crossfire Hurricane guy, that I didn't even know existed in FBI holdings.
So there's been held someplace else, or?
That's been stashed away in locations that people thought we wouldn't find it because we wouldn't know to look for it there. And as promised with my congressional partners, I'm working with Congress on constitutional oversight because that's what the American people deserve. And those documentations have been flowing to Congress nonstop on a rolling basis since that interview. But more importantly, people have had questions about January 6th and whether or not there were FBI sources, not agents, sources on the ground during January 6th. And I told you I would get you the definitive answer to that. And we have. And we are in the process, again, of working with our partners to divulge that information. And it is coming. And I will tell you this. The answer to that question will surprise and shock people because of what past FBI leaders have said about it.
Former FBI Director Chris Wray eventually admitted to Congress there were 26 FBI confidential human sources in around the Capitol January 6th, but not actual agents. Can you say that's true? Are there more than that? What you're learning from that?
I can say that that is definitely a piece of the truth. Why it took a ton of time for and questioning in Congress for the director to get that point is what I'm trying to eliminate from the FBI. If Congress asks you a question under oath, whether or not there were sources in around January 6th at the Capitol, you as the director of the FBI need to know that and not deflect and give a DC answer. You have to be prepared for that. And that's the answer we're giving. That's the answer Chris Wray should have given.
And eventually everybody's going to know the whole picture.
Yeah, because the American people deserve that. And look, no one's more frustrated than me. Remember, I was chief of staff at the Department of Defense on January 6th. We said that we were ready, and the president had previously authorized the National Guard to be there days in advance. I spent 2 years, a small fortune, grand juries, to testify to the truth. And what happens now, years later? We were right. Bowser and Pelosi rejected that offer. And instead of figuring out how to prevent security lapses like that ever again, the American public spent tens of millions of dollars and countless hours on TV listening to conspiracy theories because those in positions of leadership failed to tell the American public the truth.
All right, now, his assessment that people are going to be surprised and shocked at some of the revelations, I think many of us will not be, whatever they are. In fact, what I fear that we may be somewhat underwhelmed, but perhaps not. Yesterday, and these all connect together, a lot of focus on Trump giving pardons, and if you listen to the media, apparently now, giving a pardon is an awful, horrible thing, and it means that you don't have respect for the rule of law. It's that's just always been a presidential power in the past, one of those things that presidents do oftentimes on their way out of office. But now they will all be scrutinized, and we will hear about how all of them is a display of a lack of respect for rule and law from the presidency. One of the pardons that he was talking about is, or at least looking at, the so-called kidnapping attempt of Democrat Governor Gretchen Whitmer, saying that, quote, it looks to me like a railroad job. It was more than that. If you followed the cases of these individuals, it became very clear what I would say would be a reasonable observer, that this wasn't just a railroad job. This was a full-blown setup. This was a full-blown setup. This was something that would never have occurred if the government didn't make it happen. When something like this occurs, the average person imagines that you have a group of people that are planning to carry out some sort of plot, like, the kidnapping of the governor, that they've planned it, they're going to do it, they're going to execute it, and then maybe somebody who's a family member has insight and they get worried and concerned, so they call the FBI, and so then the FBI has one of their assets or even perhaps an employee of the FBI worm their way into the organization in order to find out what it is that they're planning, to gather information, and then once enough information and evidence is gathered about what it is that they're doing that has been observed by this undercover agent, then those individuals get arrested and charged. That is not what happened. So I want to share with you some of the details, by the way, that first were really detailed by BuzzFeed, which is left-wing. This isn't some right-wing conspiracy theory, but something that was first really focused on by the left-wing BuzzFeed site as one of the trials was unfolding. Springfield's Talk 1041, I'm Nick Reed.
Springfield's Talk 1041, the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by Wolfpack Cleaners, your residential and commercial cleaning professionals. Today we'll see showers and thunderstorms throughout the day with a high near 70. Tonight, mostly cloudy with a low around 54. For your Friday, mostly sunny skies with a high near 74. And looking ahead to Saturday, sunny with a high near 80.
A couple of things I just wanted to mention. Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty. Maggie, just a few days ago, posted of her experience with Emily, that she's amazing, and she has helped our family over the years find multiple homes. She answers every call, every text. She gets things done and is so incredibly sweet to work with. In March, towards the end of March, Chad posted, I cannot say enough good things about Emily Johnson. We were in the market for such a long time. She was patient, helpful, went far beyond what any other realtor we've worked with has gone to make sure we got into a great home. She helped find the right contractors, get our place updated, and made the paperwork a breeze. She negotiated hard when we needed it, and she got us a great price on our home our whole family loves. Thank you so much, Emily. That's what you get when it comes to home buying, home selling, whether it's your first time or you've done it multiple times. Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty. Now, Donald Trump has mentioned that he's going to look into the couple of individuals that eventually were convicted by the government in what was described as a plot to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer, Democrat governor of Michigan. And this is going to be well beyond January 6th pardon hysteria. that this is going to be painted as Trump sending a signal to his army of supporters that it's okay to go out and try to kidnap Democrat governors. Now, of course, mind you, we'll all have to suspend our understanding and recognition of the actual attempts to kill Trump, the actual attempts to kill Republicans, the actual attempts to kill Supreme Court justices that are viewed as conservative. You know, those actual real-life things that played out. We'll have to pretend none of that happened and instead rely on this fantasy world of imaginary people that are out there waiting for Trump to send them signals, and this will be it. I want to read to you because this is very important. And by the way, I believe that this MO that was operated by the FBI is similar to January 6th. And some of this was laid out by Julie Kelly, and I'm not going to read to you the piece in its entirety, but the part specifically about the case and the setup itself. And she notes that the FBI's tactics were first exposed by BuzzFeed in July of 2021 when reporters Ken Bessinger and Jessica Garrison disclosed startling details based on court filings as the matter headed to trial. They found that the number of FBI confidential human sources involved in the scheme was equal to the number of defendants. An examination of the case by BuzzFeed News also reveals that some of those informants, acting under the direction of the FBI, played a far larger role than was previously reported, they wrote, working in secret. They did more than just passively observe and report on the actions of the suspects. Instead, they had a hand in nearly every single aspect of the alleged plot, starting with its very inception. The extent of their involvement raises questions as to whether there would have ever even been a conspiracy without them. 6 men ranging in age from 22 to 44, Adam Fox, Barry Croft Jr., Brandon Caserta, Daniel Harris, Ty Garbin, and Caleb Franks faced federal charges of conspiring to kidnap and use weapons of mass destruction. 8 others faced state charges. BuzzFeed recreated much of the defendants' movements between March and October of 2020, including attendance at field training exercises and the surveillance of Whitmer's properties. While BuzzFeed offered the first account of the entrapment operation, further reporting by Real Clear Investigations, along with details revealed in court filings and trial proceedings, make the operation sound something out of a Hollywood script. It features secretive cash payouts, drug and booze-fueled parties, a convicted wife-beating FBI investigator, a career felon revealed as a longtime FBI asset, and later accused of acting as a double agent, and a dramatic takedown scene at the end. Public defenders representing the accused have identified at least 12 FBI informants and 3 undercover FBI agents managed by FBI officials in numerous field offices responsible for framing the men. In this case, the undisputed evidence establishes that government agents and informants concocted, hatched, and pushed the so-called kidnapping plan from the beginning, doing so against defendants who explicitly repudiated the plan. When the government was faced with evidence showing that the defendants had absolutely no interest in a kidnapping plot, it refused to accept failure and continued to push the plan. At the center of the action was the FBI ringleader, Dan Chappell, 34 years old at the time, an Iraq war veteran and contract truck driver for the U.S. Postal Service. Chappell, the official story goes, joined a group called the Wolverine Watchmen in early 2020 to burnish his firearm skills. Members generally interacted on social media. The government claimed that the 34-year-old Chappell became alarmed at alleged online chatter about killing police and took his concerns to a friend in law enforcement in March of 2020. A week later, the FBI hired Chappell as an informant. Over the course of the next 7 months, Chappell ingratiated himself with the men, as one defense attorney described his method, with his eye particularly on 37-year-old Adam Fox, the reported mastermind of the plot. While the media portrayed Fox as a military leader prepping an army of white supremacists to overthrow state governments across the country, he was in reality a homeless man living in a dilapidated basement of a vacuum repair shop without any running water or a toilet in a Grand Rapids strip mall. Some bum. One co-defendant referred to him as Captain Autism. Fox's lawyer, Christopher Gibbons, said Chappell took on a father figure role to the fatherless and destitute client. Fox and Chappell exchanged thousands of texts. Chappell drove Fox, who did not even own a car, to various meetups and staged events while recording every moment to preserve evidence against Fox. On at least 3 occasions, according to testimony offered at trial, Chappell offered Fox a prepaid credit card authorized by the FBI with a $5,000 limit to help him buy guns and ammunition. Fox, despite being homeless and broke, declined every time. Chappell, known as Big Dan to the group, created encrypted chats and gave real-time access to his FBI handlers working out of the Detroit FBI field office as the far-fetched plan unfolded. Informants and targets mulled over how to blow up a bridge outside Whitmer's summer cottage, kill her security detail, take her to a nearby boat launch, and either abandon her in the middle of Lake Michigan or bring her across the lake to Wisconsin to stand a civilian trial over her COVID-19 lockdown policies. One discussion involved the implausible use of a military helicopter. From appearances, a demonstration at the Michigan State Capitol in Lansing on April 30th, 2020 might well have been a law enforcement dress rehearsal for January 6th. Chappell traveled to the event with 3 members of the Watchmen later held on state charges. Some protesters were clad in military gear and carried firearms, but were not allowed to enter the building. When Chappell told the FBI handlers what happened, the FBI ordered the Michigan State Police to stand down and allow the armed protesters to go inside the Capitol. Sound familiar? News photographers captured the moments when the protesters, quote, stormed the Michigan Capitol and called out for Whitmer, resulting in the same sort of optics produced on January 6th. The incident took on a greater significance when it was revealed that Stephen D'Antuono, head of the Detroit field office, during the Whitmer caper, was promoted to head up the Washington, D.C. field office 3 months before January 6th. Now think about that for a moment. You have the FBI directing the Capitol Police to let armed protesters into the Michigan Capitol so that then they could have all of these reports in the newspaper about Trump supporters storming the Capitol. And then the person in charge of that field office gets promoted to D.C., where 3 months later, January 6th happens. Now, what an amazing coincidence that is, isn't it? More from the report coming up. Springfield's Talk 104.1. I'm Nick Reed. Sarah Myers, everyone.
Thank you. The Pyramid Roofing Company, we had a lunch bunch yesterday at Retro Metro, and while I was talking to the winner, we were just talking about the amount of recent storms, and long story short, we started talking about hail and how he noticed that all of the homes around him had storm damage, and he ended up calling the Pyramid Roofing Company, and he just shared his experience with me and just really appreciated all of the help that he received from Josh and his team. And you hear that quite a bit with the Pyramid Roofing Company. They know that getting a new roof is not a fun purchase, and so they really try to streamline that entire process and make it as simple and smooth as possible. So whether you need a whole new roof or just a simple roof repair, or maybe you've noticed after a big storm that all of the homes around you are getting roofing estimates and you just want to be sure as well, schedule that free roof inspection with the Pyramid Roofing Company. Now you can find all of the contact information for the Pyramid team under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at ksgf.com.
The media on the left, they are going to go insane and really have a display of hysterics over Trump's declaration that he's thinking about looking into potential pardons for some of the individuals that were convicted of what was called by the government a kidnapping attempt of Governor Whitmer. And so I'm reading to you from a piece in which the information originated from BuzzFeed in an investigation they did, their left wing, and what was clearly recognized as a complete setup by the FBI. And in fact, the individual that they painted as the ringleader mastermind was actually a homeless man who lived in the basement of a vacuum repair store in a strip mall that had no running water or a toilet. Someone that was referred to lovingly as Captain Autism. This is the person that the government claimed masterminded everything. Now, it was actually set up and directed, the evidence shows in the court, or the trial showed, by a paid informant named Dan Chappell. In exchange for his work, picking up where we left off before the traffic, the FBI paid Chappell at least $54,000 in cash. Part of that haul included an envelope handed over by his primary FBI handler in December of 2020 filled with $23,000 in cash as payment for a mission accomplished. The Bureau also supplied Chappell with other personal items such as a laptop, computer, new tires for his car. Chappell also used a rented SUV, again funded by the FBI, to drive his targets to various locations as part of the trap. Other informants for the FBI were involved as well. A longtime FBI source named Steve Robeson from Wisconsin organized a, quote, militia meeting in Ohio in June of 2020 and pressured the government's targets, including Fox and Croft, to attend as he wore a wire to record what was said during the event. Robeson arranged other events throughout the summer, including at his remote property in Wisconsin, where he constructed a so-called kill house for the men to practice shooting. At one point, Robeson suggested the exercise could be used to, quote, storm a state capitol building or governor's residence. Robeson, it turns out, is a convicted felon several times over, including on charges of sex with a minor, with a rap sheet spanning at least 9 separate states. He was paid roughly $20,000 for his involvement in the Whitmer caper. Prosecutors would later accuse him of acting as a double agent for allegedly tipping off one of the defendants that his arrest was imminent. At least 2 other FBI informants were tasked with managing Croft, who had been under FBI surveillance since 2019 for his extremist views, according to documents. It was later revealed that the informants, including Chappell, violated FBI protocol by getting drunk and high on drugs with their targets numerous times, sleeping in the same hotel, and suggesting ways to advance the kidnapping plan. At one point, Chappell took an oath to join a separate group called the 3% Patriot Militia Group, one made up by the FBI, then convinced Fox to become the head of the Michigan chapter, which didn't even exist, all in an effort to have the men believe Chappell was part of a non-existent militia movement. Defense lawyer Gibbons described the ruse during the April 2022 trial as a free money, free bombs, daily contact for months, fake militia, build up vulnerable adults with a fake militia and a title of commanding officer, send him a federal agent to join his militia. More Behind the scenes machinations were disclosed when the defense uncovered hundreds of communications between the agents and informants that showed how they guided the plot every step of the way. One text suggested that the FBI and Chappell attempted to lure a disabled Vietnam veteran named Frank into initiating a similar plot against Democrat Governor Ralph Northam. Mission is to kill the governor specifically, Chappell's FBI handlers texted him in August of 2020. Despite the FBI's best efforts, the group of so-called kidnappers started to disband by August of 2020. Chappell asked his FBI handlers how to put more pressure on the individuals so that no one broke off from the group. To rally the increasingly uninterested group that month, Chappell proposed firing live rounds into Whitmer's cottage and the residence of other governors, then sending the shell casings to news reporters. Quote, "Look at you bringing people together," one of the FBI handlers texted Chappell. Even that wasn't enough to solidify a kidnapping scheme, so according to the numerous exchanges between the FBI assets and trial testimony from one cooperating witness, the FBI ran another undercover agent into the plot in September of 2020 to tempt the men into trying to purchase bomb-making materials. During a get-together in mid-September, an FBI undercover agent known as Red showed the group a video of a Chevy Tahoe being blown up as a way to demonstrate his credentials. That video had been produced by the FBI. At the same get-together, several more FBI informants and Red took their targets on a reconnaissance mission to stake out Whitmer's vacation cottage, the scene of the alleged prospective crime. This was the second time Chappell drove Fox to the property. The governor, by the way, and her staff were in communication with authorities for months as the entrapment scheme was underway. In fact, the FBI installed poll cameras and 3D devices around her property to record any activity to be used as evidence, which, by the way, demonstrates they all knew it wasn't going to happen. The fact that Whitmer knew about this plot for months. Chappell also drove them into a location of the FBI arrest point in Michigan on October 7th under the ruse to meet Red, who promised to sell them military-style garb, not explosive materials. Members of the FBI hostage rescue team, whose missions include high-risk arrest, were there waiting. Things went downhill for the government after that. Richard Trask, one of the main FBI investigators on the case, who signed the complaint against the defendants, was criminally charged in July of 2021 for brutally assaulting his wife after a swingers party in Kalamazoo. Police body cam video showed a partially clothed, bloody, and apparently intoxicated Trask talking with police during the arrest. Reporters also found profane and anti-Trump posts on his social media account. Now, we've got to take a break here, and we've got a traffic update, we'll get this posted so you can read, and it goes further and further and further into it. And though any reasonable person that sees this recognizes these were individuals that never would have even dreamed of doing this. And here they took some poor homeless guy and utilized, all of this was done in order to try and create this environment in which people felt Trump and his supporters were dangerous. That's why all of this was done. And the fact that the field director office, on somewhat of a tangent here, directed the Michigan Capitol Police to stand down and allow armed protesters into the Capitol for the purposes of pictures being taken and a narrative being created, was then transferred to D.C., where 3 months later, January 6th, unfolded the exact same way. All of this shows us exactly what the FBI had been doing in order to set up Americans, to recruit and create scenarios in order to be able to further suppress the American people and essentially rig the outcome of elections. All right, we do have Author of the Week coming up in the next hour, sponsored consistently and faithfully by the incredible people at ABC Books on North Glenstone. Don't forget, we do have Heroes Breakfast tomorrow. Free breakfast for veterans at Scramblers during the Friday Road Show. News in 60 seconds. I'm Nick Reed. Springfield's Talk 1041. Welcome, everyone. My name is Nick Reed. Hope you are all doing fantastic. Tomorrow's Friday. We've got the weekend to kick off, and we will do it from none other than Scramblers. And it is a special Friday for veterans free breakfast. We call it Heroes Breakfast. And it means you get free breakfast if you're a veteran. You just come on by, and our partners at Scramblers, the Warrior's Journey, Delta Roofing, and Air Services, Heating, Cooling, Plumbing, Electrical, all pitching in order to buy breakfast. And, I mentioned earlier this week as well, I want to thank those of you who, you may remember several months ago, we did a fundraiser with St. George's Donuts there on National and Battlefield, and all of those proceeds also went to help pay for these breakfasts as they have become increasingly popular over the years. We've been doing this well over a decade. And it just increases in popularity, so there's obviously cost, and that's where you all stepped up in order to help those partners that we always have, and so it allows us to do it. It's just a great event. We love doing it, and we're grateful to be able to do this. And we just I don't know, it seemed like once upon a time it was very common that you had these just community gatherings for the sake of community gatherings. And with social media, that just happens less and less. It does happen in some capacities, and I just like the fact that, if anything, we're able to, usually on a monthly basis, have a big gathering and a get-together where people enjoy one another's community and company, and I think that that's a pretty big deal. To me, I think that's even more valuable than the free breakfast. So thank you to all of our partners again, and hopefully we'll see you veterans out there tomorrow between 6A and 9A. We do have Author of the Week, sponsored by ABC Books, coming up in just a couple of moments. First, let's get the latest news update.
And the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see showers and thunderstorms throughout the day with a high near 70. Tonight, mostly cloudy with a low around 54. For your Friday, mostly sunny skies with a high near 74. And looking ahead to Saturday, sunny with a high near 80.
Streaming live, KSGF.com, of course. As always, any of the show that you happen to miss, it happens. You can get in our podcast section at KSGF.com. We also have the app, very convenient. And then if you do Spotify, you do iTunes. Those are a couple of other places that you can always get the podcast as well. And, of course, on Thursdays, we have our Author of the Week segment, bringing you an author of different sorts, different backgrounds. It is always and consistently sponsored by ABC Books on North Glenstone. Fantastic bookstore, fantastic locally owned bookstore, and that is just south of Kearney for any of your book needs. And they do have an Author of the Week actual physical section there. So I know a lot of times you just don't really know what it is you want to, you finished up with some stuff and you're looking for something else. It's a great resource in addition to the plethora of other books that they have to find that different section there. I want to welcome today's author of the week, Dr. Alex McFarland, a youth, religious, and culture expert, author of 20 books, and he's heard live daily on nearly 200 stations across the U.S. on American Family Radio Network, and is host of the Alex McFarland Show on NRB TV. And he also serves as director of World View for Charis Bible College in Woodland Park, Colorado. I want to thank you for being with us here this morning. And before we actually get into the book aspect of it, honestly, one of the reasons I reached out was because of information that I came across regarding McFarland's Equip retreat camps. And this, I was reading a little bit about this trouble that you recognize is on the horizon, and we hear a lot about it in different capacities about being a man. What is a man? We just saw that the Democrats as a political party are going to spend $20 million learning how to talk to men, and the recognition yeah, I know, right?
Yeah, they should do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
that's a good use of $20 million.
Yeah, isn't it? Well, maybe they should use that $20 million first to be able to identify what a man is, because they clearly have trouble between men and women. But that aside, there really is this uncertainty and what I think has been this attempt to redefine what a man is or what a guy is. And particularly if you are growing up in those formidable years, that can lead young people on these adult pathways that can be destructive and confusing and depressing. And so would you talk just a bit about that before we get into the book itself?
Sure, absolutely. Well, first of all, Nick, thank you for having me. And hey, I got to say this. Are you in Springfield, Missouri?
Yes, sir.
You are, right? About 4 or 5 years ago, I was speaking at a camp near Springfield. It was late March, early April. Mm-hmm. And I've got to tell you, and I've been to all 50 states. I love America. I've been very blessed to see this country. I've told many audiences, the most beautiful landscape that I've ever seen in the springtime is the greater Springfield, Missouri area. I had a rental car and I went driving around one day for 2 or 3 hours, kind of out in the country, and I have never seen such beautiful green springtime landscape in America than Springfield, Missouri.
Well, you say that,
late March.
Yeah, and you say that, and I think many people would be like, oh, well, he's just saying that. But those would be people that never really spend much time traveling, I'd say, outside of the area to realize how beautiful it actually is here. We're very fortunate. We become accustomed to it. And so I appreciate that, and I know that we do sometimes take that for granted.
Yeah. So I just fell in love with that part of the world. I mean, it's very beautiful out there. But to your question, Nick, it's interesting that endlessly in our country, young women are validated, and that's great. But young men are at best ignored, blamed, and often, if a guy is being a guy or a little boy, being rambunctious and, doing boy things, it's, reprimanded as toxic masculinity. And there's a couple of philosophies behind this, one of which is relativism, that we can make our own truth and create our own reality. But the other is really critical theory. And CRT assumes that whatever is the dominant power or leading force, and leadership is not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, the one that has influence or power may be evil, but may not necessarily be evil. Fathers, parents, elected officials, ministers, educators that are in leadership they could be malicious, but they very well might be benevolent. But critical theory says whatever is the dominant power is necessarily evil. So part of the reason that masculinity is under attack in the USA, and the Democrats that do not believe in God or truth are at the forefront of this deconstruction of our culture. That's why, it's assumed that females are victims, therefore they must be validated no matter what, and males are the aggressors, and they must be suppressed and opposed no matter what. And really, what the fallout is that right now, young men in their 20s, almost 15% are clinically depressed. And so we've got an attack on reality, but it's really the victims are young people that are growing up, and they have no identity. Not all, but many. And so we've got to have the courage and really the commitment to speak truth to a culture that's decided to suppress truth and remake reality.
Well, and I think you can elaborate on this. What I think part of your message is that the instinct is, well, let's go back to the way it was, and that's simply, the conventional wisdom of manly men. But that's not what it is. I mean, it's much more than that. That is part of it. Because just biologically, that's generally how we are made up. But that it's really, truly, it's the Christian faithful approach that is needed.
Yeah, and I'm a Christian. I believe Christianity is true. I've spent my adult life researching and writing on, the evidence for the Bible and Jesus Christ. But let me just say, even apart from Christianity, there is moral truth. The founders of America, and really 2,000 years of Western society, called it natural law. There are, natural laws, just like there are spiritual laws. And in the physical world, humans are born XX or XY. There are females, there are males. And that's just biological reality. And so, even right now in Colorado, there's legislation being discussed about like camps where teenage boys and girls would shower together. I mean, this is insanity. And let me say, to have appropriate moral boundaries and things in our culture that are absolutely right and absolutely unequivocally wrong. That's not racism, that's not phobia, that's not oppression. It's just being responsible, mature adults. And I've got to say, there are certain things about life and reality that we have no say over. None of us picked where we were born or when we were born. And despite the left's attempt to remake reality, none of us get to pick what our gender is. There are just some things about life, and the sooner we acknowledge this, the better, the wiser we are. There's some things that the good Lord decided on our behalf, and gender is one of them. For about 25 to 30 years, there have been some phrases in the culture, one of which is toxic masculinity. It's been around since the 90s. And if a male is exhibiting maleness, that's toxic. Men are endlessly told to get in touch with their feminine side. And part of that is this assumption that we have ultimate control over reality, even our gender. And that's just not realistic. To think that we can be our own God and chart our own reality. There's some things in life that we can choose, many things in life that we have no control over. And the sooner we admit that, the more we can get on with what it means to be a healthy, balanced human being.
We are talking with our author of the week, sponsored by ABC Books on North Glenstone, Dr. Alex McFarland. Let's talk a bit about the book, 100 Questions and Answers for Families, which is actually a follow-up to 100 Bible Questions and Answers. Just tell us a bit about the book and what you hope people get from it.
Well, thanks very much. I appreciate that, and I really, really appreciate being sponsored for the author of the week. But yeah, we've done a radio show for about 15 years called Exploring the Word, and it's myself and Bert Harper, and we teach through the Bible and we take questions. And Bert Harper and I have just cataloged questions that people ask, about child rearing and healthy conflict resolution within the family, and what constitutes a healthy marriage, and what about parenting, and how do I impart moral values to my children? What does it mean when the Bible says children are a blessing from the Lord? Everything from having family devotions to resolving conflict, domestic violence in the home. So it's 100 Bible questions where the Bible deals with, family issues and marriage. And, Nick, I give God the glory. It's funny. The first book, which was just a general 100 Bible questions and answers, that book has really been swept along. Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Costco, Walgreens picked up this book for families, and that swept along the first book. Even though it was this book, we call it the blue book. It's got a blue cover. This book came second, and then we were asked to write a follow-up that's going to be out in September, 100 Bible Questions on Prophecy and the End Times. And these are just actual questions from actual radio listeners. And so we just want it to be a blessing to people, because I believe, Nick, as goes the family, so goes the nation, really. There's as an academic, but as a minister, there's a whole lot that I'm concerned about and care about for the future of America. But listen, give us Christian homes and America's going to be fine.
Right.
If you want to help save our nation and contribute to Christ's Great Commission, become a champion for family. And by the way, let me just say this. We do every summer. We've done this for 2.5 decades, but we do 7 summer youth camps. And our first camp starts in Montana this Sunday, and we're in, the Richmond, Virginia area, and upstate New Jersey and Iowa. We've got camps all over the country where we teach biblical worldview. We'll have like 1,200 teenagers, 7th through 12th graders. More and more kids are asking about how to build a family.
Right.
And we have guys and girls, and kids ask questions, who made God and where did God come from and all that. But more and more, like last summer, we were in Georgia and we had 150 guys, teenage boys, and they were asking, how do I find a wife? How even guys ask, how do I ask a girl out for a date?
Yeah.
And hey, that's a fine thing for kids to be thinking about, because number one, have Jesus in your life. But the second most important decision we'll ever make is, the choosing of a spouse and building a family. And so we're trying to impart an ethic of marriage and family into the hearts and priorities of American youth.
For our listeners, you do have a website, alexmcfarland.com, and I noticed that some of the information I have that you do a speaker series. Is that something that people can view online or will be able to view online?
And thanks for asking about that. We're doing camps all over for the teenagers. The speaker series is in Myrtle Beach, which is in a big resort area.
Right.
Myrtle Beach has a lot of theaters, kind of like Branson, Missouri, almost. There's a music industry, so we've rented a theater down here, and we had Dinesh D'Souza.
Right.
We're bringing in Charlie Kirk. The next one, though, June 15th, Gary Chapman, the guy that wrote The Five Love Languages, fantastic scholar, Dr. Gary Chapman. And so that's for, largely adults attending these, but alexmcfarland.com/conversations.
Okay.
And we're,
Well, no,
and I want to say
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, thanks to the bookstore who's sponsoring. Is it ABC Books?
Yeah,
the author of the
ABC
week?
Books. Yeah. They're
I'm
fantastic
deeply
local
grateful that you do that.
supporters. Yeah, they're fantastic folks over there. Well, I saw specifically Dinesh D'Souza, who we love him, and he's been kind enough to be on the show a number of times. And then Charlie Kirk is actually one of the shows that we carry here, and there are numerous Turning Point USA chapters in some of the colleges and high schools around here. And so when I saw those names specifically, I wanted to ask whether or not our listeners, because I knew about the Myrtle Beach location, but I wasn't sure if they would have access if they wanted to watch. The Dinesh D'Souza one that's already occurred. Charlie Kirk, I believe August 21st is his date. So that
Sure.
alexmcfarland.com /conversations.
Yeah, and
Okay.
by the way, Dinesh is great. He's been a friend of mine for like 17 years. I got to tell you, he just killed it on May 4th. Ovation after ovation after ovation. He spoke for a little over an hour without notes. And it's funny, I was just at a church, and about 45 people from one church went. And people came up and told me repeatedly, they said that was the single greatest speech I've ever heard in my life. So what we're going to do, we're going to put them up online. We did not stream it live. We just didn't have the capacity to stream it live on May 4th. But the Charlie Kirk event, August 21, we will be streaming that on alexmcfarland.com /conversations. Charlie, I've shared the stage with Charlie Kirk on a few occasions. He's brilliant. Oh, what a great American, And of course, there's been people that have emailed us and said, "Oh, Alex, you're a Christian nationalist. Why are you having these politically oriented speakers?" Well, because we care about God and country.
Oh, yeah.
And let me just encourage people: don't be coward into silence if somebody reprimands you. Look. As a Christian, my home is in heaven, of course. But Augustine said this 1,600 years ago in the City of God. St. Augustine, brilliant guy, lived 354 to 430 AD. He said, until we are in the City of God, heaven, we have an obligation to the city of man. We are to be salt and light. And so, the future, we as Christians, we can't just step back and say, "Oh, I don't sully myself with the things of this world. I'm just going to wait till I go to heaven." No. Edmund Burke was a colonial statesman. He said, "All that is necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing." And so we've got to muster the courage to stand for truth and to call our culture back to moral truth.
I think if Christians are honest with themselves, oftentimes they will, I guess use the term hide behind the turn the other cheek as an excuse to not do what's uncomfortable. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And what we do it's not always easy. It's not always convenient.
Well, sure, yeah.
But it's right.
Yeah, and that's where it is easier to be like, well, like you said, I don't want to sully myself with politics or because confrontation isn't fun. And I think particularly for loving people, which oftentimes Christians try to be, and so it's sometimes I think we rationalize not doing what is uncomfortable by claiming that that's the right thing to do. and I'm sure to all degree we all do it, some more than others. Dr. Alex McFarland, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time that you spent with us this morning. I know it was a little more time than I requested, so thank you for your generosity.
Well, I'm grateful for KSGF and you, Nick, and I'm deeply grateful for ABC Books. This is just a real honor, and I'm appreciative.
And next time you're driving through these beautiful parts, please let us know. We'd love to get together with you.
You know it. God bless you, my friend.
All right, you too as well. Thank you, sir. Dr. Alex McFarland, again, the book 100 Bible Questions and Answers for Families. Author of the Week, sponsored by ABC Books on North Glenstone. I'm Nick Reed.